Hello Internet,
Minions have spawned.
and welcome to a new thing I'm doing, where I'm going to do a sort of tutorial video on one of these gods. And what I'm doing this time is, for the first time, is going to be Izanami. So I'm here in jungle practice, ready to show you how I deal with Izanami. It's going to take a while, of course I'm going to chop it up, but I'm going to walk you through my build and explain why I'd use this build rather than the normal build that people try to use. First of all, actives. Frenzy is a very strong active. It gives you extra attack speed and power and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's really handy. People should use this item more often. Sprint is also useful because it allows you to get away and chase things faster, particularly if you're not doing something like not building Fatalis like I do. Purification is also handy, but not quite as useful as it is on other gods, because her escape, the 3, does still have a delay on it, so you're likely to still take damage and possibly die. Same thing sort of applies to Sanctuary, but when using Sanctuary, you obviously can't be using the dash, meaning that you have the same problem. Basically, in this god, you have to try and stay out of getting into such a situation in the first place. I am going to buy my starting items first as well. So my starting items I usually go for combat boots and a short bow. And I'm not going to bother with the relics because this is just jungle practice. You can't really show much in jungle practice. Other things you've got here, Curse and Wrath. Curse again, useful for chasing, great against healers and that sort of thing, just usual stuff. Wrath not so useful because you don't tend to get close enough for that. Blink, you could. I don't see why you would. There's not really much reason to blink in when you have your 3, which is a leap, and an invis, which can do the same thing. Teleport, again, more useful for warriors. Med, useful as it normally is. Other ones really useful as they normally are. Sunder, handy for tankier gods, but not as handy as it might be for other gods that can use it, because her passive, if I can bring that up, that one here, gives her up to 20% pen as she loses health. Very handy in fights. And lastly, Thorns. Great use when you're boxing. In other circumstances, not so much. So with that done, let's go farm some minions. Now, Izanami's minion farm is one of the strongest things about her. And there's a reason why some people level the 2, but you can clear minions using just your basics, because it goes through all of the minions. It clears wave really quickly like that. Now that I've got a level from that, I will show you again, but with using the 2. So wait for the minion wave to spawn. Alright. The 2. Add some extra damage to clear the wave faster. You might want to use it to finish off the wave instead. Don't see why you would. Personally, I use it sooner, that way it's off cooldown faster and you can use it again. As for how to use abilities on not your minion wave, I'll go over that right now that I've got 3 of the abilities up. I don't tend to use the ult all that much, but I'll get to the ult later. Alright, first of all, I'm going to show you this. This is the attack pattern. It's if you throw the counters and they return. It's difficult to get used to because if you move a lot, I'll get a glancing blow on them, and then you move to the side, you get 1 hit, like that. It's kind of hard to do on purpose, but yeah. And there's a little glitch where they get stuck in the walls as well when that happens, because it doesn't expect to not be able to return. Like that. Other than that, nothing really else of note here. Now, going in, let's say this is a wall here. You can use that to go through the wall, and then use the 2, and take the 1, tear through them like that, and you are good. They are dead. Obviously, early game she can't do all that much, and late game she is a lot stronger. Go over that again. If you've got no mana left, you can still go in like that, but I recommend against it because the dash or leap is incredibly expensive, and early game she can't box particularly well using her just at auto attacks. I'm doing barely any damage to Gar with these here. Okay. Actually, screw that, that's a bad idea. That's what she's like with nothing built. After having that start, next thing I'd go into is Warrior Tabi, and it's a larger damage boost, and then Ichaival. Warrior Tabi is a bit cheaper and gives a little bit of a larger leap, and Ichaival works better once you have more power anyway. And it's generally a useful starting item because it's cheap. You can build things like Arcee on her, and cheap attack speed items that give lifesteal or whatever as well. I don't, but maybe that's just me being bad. As you can see, that's improved the damage a lot by having those two items finished, because of course it will. The next item that I go into is usually Kin's Sais. If you're really tanky, you can go into Executioner instead, or if you want, you go into a crit item, as I do build crits, as much as a lot of people don't. I'm going to explain why a bit later on once I've completed the build, as to why I build it this way. But I'm going to go Kin's Sais first, and I'm actually going to bring up the combat screen here so that you can see what Executioner does. It's a lot more damage than before. You can now kill him easily using just the auto attacks. Obviously, a lot faster using the boosted ones. Ow. I'm level 5. I'm going to go with the ult. The ult is a little small circle that appears and does this. And even the bot can dodge it by accident if you're not careful. So it is a hard thing to aim, and true, it does do a lot of damage if you manage to land it, but interesting thing with that is the wind up on the ult, the time in which you can't be attacking yourself using your auto attacks or other abilities, is about 1.5 seconds. I don't know what it is exactly. There may be someone who's calculated what it actually is, and you can probably find that online somewhere. But as far as I'm aware, it's about 1.5 seconds, and the damage it can do at max level is 610 plus 120% of your power, which will be at most, since your power caps out at 400, the most it could possibly do is 400 times 120% is 480, and then on to 610, and you get 1000. And since it takes 1.5 seconds, in order to be worth it, it would have to be greater than 1.5 times your DPS, and at max level, it really isn't. That's basically the reason why I don't build power, because as much as the abilities scale a lot with power, they are too slow. If there were faster abilities, or had more with a longer reach, something like Neath's ult that you can aim perfectly from across the map because it locks onto targets, assuming that no one body blocks it, then sure, I'd build power, because that way you don't have to worry about the delay and all that. But even the 2 has delay. The 2 has moved the same speed as your auto attacks do base level. That's really slow, and when it hits for, obviously it'll be a bit more than your basic attacks might do if you built power, but then you'd have weaker base attacks. So no, the way I do it is to use the 2 the slow that I engage with, so I don't go through Palace, and then finish them off with the 1. That is the way I play it. Now that I've gone over that, I'm going to complete the build. I've got that set out, so I can talk over that properly. And then, after I've done that, I'm going to round myself up to level 20, and I'll skip to once I've finished that, so I can show you what the stats are like when it's completed, and some alternative options to this build. Now, items I have now, you can see them there. It's Ichaival, Sais, Executioner, Wind Demon, and Deathbringer. Wind Demon because it gives a attack speed and movement speed boost when you crit, which helps you keep on your opponent when you've not got Fatalis, which I don't have because it actually reduces the amount of damage you can do. And obviously the increase in attack speed helps because you don't actually have quite enough attack speed with this build without it. Though with it, it goes a little bit over. So in order to get the correct amount of attack speed, you could swap out the Warrior Tabi for Ninja Tabi, and then build a different crit item, Malice or something, so you can get more damage in. But that involves having an even weaker start than you normally do, because early game, power makes her stronger, but later in the game, attack speed and crits make her stronger. So, as much as early on, power might make it look like you're gaining a lot more, later on, attack speed and crits will do more damage. I've mathematically calculated,
Run from me!
and I'm pretty certain I haven't made calculations incorrectly. Right, before I skip ahead to level 20, I'd like to go over briefly on which ability to level up in what order and why, how I decided that. I tend to level up for 1 first, because I use the 2 for a slow and not for damage, so leveling up doesn't increase the slow, and it only increases damage a fairly small amount compared to the scaling with power, and the amount of damage you get from the steroid, because obviously it lasts a lot longer. After that, you can choose to be leveling the 2 or the 3. I level the 2 because it lasts longer, the 3 lasts longer. You can level the 3, which reduces the cost and cooldown and increases the duration of the invisibility after you've used it. So it helps with utility, being able to go in and get out again afterwards. So you could level up the 3 if you're wanting to use the 3 as both your engage and your escape if you're worried about not being able to get a kill, or worried about having to get too close before using the dash to get the invisibility. As for leveling the ult, I tend to save leveling the ult for the end, because as I said, the ult does a lot of power damage if you have a lot of power, and it's not a power build, so the ult isn't going to do a whole lot of damage anyway. It's not going to do as much damage as the auto attacks. I just save it to the end so that I can get a better chase to finish off people who've managed to run away. Right, I am now level 20 and I can talk over this properly. Alright, I was saying about attack speed earlier. Now, once the steroid here is at max level, you get a 75% boost to attack speed. Now, in order to reach exactly 2.5 attack speed, the maximum attack speed, you would have to have a attack speed before activating the steroid of 1.86. This build does not give an attack speed of 1.86, but if you were to sell Warrior Tabi and get Ninja Tabi, it does have 1.86. So if you want to swap them out like that, then swap out Wind Demon for Malice or something like that, then feel free to do that. I don't know what sort of effect it'll have on damage, because you will get 20 less power from that, but you'll get 10 more power from that, so maybe it does do more damage. It certainly do less damage early on, because it'll have less power early on. As for other things, Ichaival, most people will sell Ichaival before the end of the game. Once they've completed the rest of their items, usually will sell something like Ichaival, and then buy another crit item so that you can get a higher crit chance. Now that I've sorted that out, I can have a look at what this does. There are some things you can do, sort of auto attack, because they have engage, start off with a basic attack and then do that I'm not so sure about things like auto attack cancelling, but I do know that you can. I'm going to show you. Once the cooldown's off, in a second, do an auto attack with the 2, an auto attack, activate the pad, the steroid, and hit them some more times. I don't know how to do that. I don't know if it does more damage. I haven't calculated that stuff because that stuff is very difficult to calculate. But if you want to try and play around with throwing auto attacks between the abilities, you can. If not, you can just use the 2 steroid and get the kill. So this build does do a lot of damage here, even without the steroid active. As I showed just there. So this is without the steroid active. Quite a lot of damage. And this is with the steroid active. A lot more damage, a lot faster. Because the damage per basic attack, per total attack, for when the one is active, is more than double when it's not active. It is a massive increase. I don't think I have many more to say about this build or how I play this god. So I'm going to quickly swap these items out for some power items to show you the difference in damage. Right, I now have a build set here focused more on ability damage, even with a Jotun's or with Jotun's Wrath, whichever way it's pronounced, to give better cooldowns on the abilities. I don't know whether people build that normally. I haven't seen many other builds for Izanami, because I haven't really looked at other builds, because I'd rather make my own build. But I'm going to show you now the same combo as I did before with this build. So, Invis in here, and 2, 1. It is still a lot of damage that gets done there. But the basic attacks go here. Do death damage.
I'm just getting started.
It's not a extremely noticeable difference, but it is definitely less damage. Especially when the steroid is active. The difference between having the steroid not active and its build is barely noticeable. But obviously, there is a good part of this build, which I'm going to demonstrate now, which is obviously the ability damage. So, ult, 2, burst someone down incredibly quickly, and lift my ult with 64 seconds until it comes back up again. We'll probably have people who prefer to play this god. Is the reason why they build the power builds. I personally don't like that. I rather have the consistent damage and doing damage with my 1 rather than with my 2 and my ult. Especially given, as I've calculated, it does end up being a higher amount of damage per second. Because, yeah, a damage per second does still apply with abilities. It's just a bit harder to calculate because calculating the amount of time an ability takes isn't as easy as calculating the amount of time your attacks take. So, that is my guide finished. I'm going to end this with a quick summary, so anyone who's skipped to the end here can still get the information. So, this is the build that I use to crits and attack speed. You want to have your attack speed without the 1 active cap at 1.86 because that gives you the optimal attack speed and damage when you have the 1 active. I like to build crits on her because that way you do even more damage with your auto attacks and your 1, and as far as I've calculated, doing more damage with your auto attacks and your 1 gives you more damage per second than having lots of power to deal damage with the abilities, which will still deal a lot of damage regardless. It's only about 200 points on the ult and maybe 150 on the 2. And with that, my guide is done. If you want me to do guides on more gods, post a suggestion in the comment section below, and I'll try and make a guide on whatever gods you suggest as soon as possible. I might even make it a weekly thing if I get enough suggestions. I might not make it a weekly thing, maybe more a fortnightly thing. These things do take a bit of time, and there aren't enough gods to be doing it weekly. It lasts maybe take a year. Take a year to go through all of them if I was doing it weekly. Then it'll be out. Aside from that, I'm going to be doing some gameplay with Izanami over the next few weeks, interspersed with my other videos, where I'll try and show you off how I play with this build in a game, the order I build items in, and how I change it to fit with certain enemy teams, if it's an extremely tanky team or extremely squishy team. So look forward to that, and see you in the next video.